Hi everyone, it's Tempe again. This is a one-shot that I've broken into 7 parts that is about Izuku, who has a shape-shifting quirk and he gets stuck. Eventually, Aizawa finds him. It does briefly mention about parental death, so if that bothers you, please don't listen to this. Please go check out Griffin Rose's other works or the original work, which is linked in the description below. Alright, that's everything, so let's get started. Cat Days Remix by Griffin Rose. Being human again was weird. Izuku hadn't expected there to be an adjustment period. He just kept trying to eat and drink face first. And when picking anything up, his first instinct was to reach with his mouth. Shota had caught his head a few times before he could bite the remote. It was incredibly embarrassing. He was also cold all the time now, burying under blankets and seeking out every patch of sunlight he could find. He actually missed his fur coat. And talking? He wanted nothing more for months, and he did not appreciate his vocal cords shrinking with his lack of speech over the year. The best he could do was gruff whispers, and they made his throat tickle. He guzzled down the honey lemon tea Hisashi made, and then sucked on the cough drops Shota got him like his life depended on it. He wanted to talk. He wanted to say something, and actually have people understand him. He wanted to ask questions, wanted to have real conversations. He was tired of charades and code games, meowing once for yes and twice for no. Because God, did he have questions? He'd asked a lot with the magnets, but there was so much more he wanted to know. And some things just needed to be a real conversation. There were certain topics he didn't want to discuss with brightly colored magnets. At least Shota didn't seem to be in a hurry to get rid of him. Izuku had worried before that the second he changed back, Shota would drag him to the police and dump him. It wasn't like Shota had any real obligation to him after all. He'd already done so much for Izuku. Izuku couldn't ask for anything more. But Shota just kept giving him more. Maybe it was because he'd been so tired and still recovering from the night before. Neither Shota or Hisashi brought up what would happen next. Hisashi made katsudon for dinner, and he even went out to get ice cream for dessert. It was after dessert, when Hisashi had gone home and Izuku was lapping up, sipping, damn it, another cup of tea, that Shota finally addressed the elephant in the room. So, guess we need to talk about what happens next, Shota said. He had his own cup of herbal tea, and they were seated comfortably in the living room. Izuku stiffened. He'd been content here. Shota was easy to live with. He'd taken Izuku's weird cat habits in stride, and he'd left Izuku to his own devices for the most part. But he'd still done everything he could to accommodate Izuku, especially once he learned Izuku was actually a kid. Even without proper communication, Izuku had still felt like Shota understood him more than his own father had. He was going to be sad to leave this place. He wasn't ready to say goodbye to Shota yet. "Can I stay here?" he whispered. He curled up on the couch, cradling his mug and trying not to let his tears drop in it. Crying was bizarre. He'd gotten so used to his cat version, he'd forgotten what it was like as a human. It was messy and snotty and just very wet. Shota's eyes widened. "Why would you want that?" he asked. Izuku pulled his knees in closer and ducked his head down. His bangs fell into his face. "It's peaceful here. You've been really kind to me." Shota sighed and rubbed the back of his head. I'm not a good parent. I barely take care of myself. Izuku shook his head. He didn't know what Shota was talking about. He'd taken great care of him this whole time. You're good? I can't take care of you, Shota argued. Not in the long run, and you've seen my work hours. It was one thing when you were a cat, but I can't leave a kid here alone. Izuku didn't really see the difference. He wouldn't do anything different now that he was human while Shota was out of the house. Besides, you need to go to school and hang out with kids your own age. All that good stuff. Right. School. He was so far behind now. It was going to take him forever to catch up. And other kids? How was he ever supposed to hang out with other kids? He barely knew how to be one. And after those kids in that one home, he really wasn't eager to be around kids anytime soon, even if he was human now. Shota sighed and dragged his hand over his face. I'll let you stay here a few more days, okay? Just until you're a little more settled with being a kid again and your voice is back. Then I'm going to bring you to a foster home. Izuku looked up sharply at that. Foster home? That meant... He hadn't wanted to ask yet. Not until he could properly talk. But... my mom? Shota grimaced. Should have brought this up with more tact. Sorry. She, passed away last year, and your dad is in jail now. His lip trembled, and his vision blurred. She was gone. Really and truly gone. Shota gently plucked his mug out of his hands and set it on the coffee table. He sat on the couch next to Izuku, and Izuku leapt for his side, grasping at Shota's shirt and hiding his face in it as sobs caught in his throat. Wordlessly, Shota held on to him and let him cry until he'd cried himself to sleep. A few days turned into a week. Shota wasn't sure how that happened. Izuku regained his voice little by little, but he was still a relatively quiet kid, relying on body language to silently get his point across most of the time. After a year of having no voice, it wasn't surprising to see him still leaning on the learned habits. It would fade with time. Shota wasn't worried. It wouldn't be his problem anyway. He'd hand the kid over to the foster family, and that would be it. He'd be out of the kid's life, like he was supposed to be. He took the first day off of work, and then Hisashi and Nemuri took over babysitting for him while he had patrol, so Izuku wouldn't be alone. Izuku didn't appreciate it, but the socialization was good for him. Eventually, though, Shota was out of excuses. Izuku had his voice back and remembered to use his hands and not his mouth about 90% of the time. He floated the idea to Izuku over breakfast. Izuku went quiet, lowering his chopsticks. He wasn't crying yet, but tears didn't look far away. Shota did not understand why this kid wanted to stay with him so badly. It's the best option, Shota persisted. Maybe he could reason with the kid before emotions became too much of the conversation. You need to be around other kids your age, and I'm not a good parent. I'm only 23. I could be a cat again, Izuku offered. Shota's chest ached, like he'd just been kicked in the solar plexus. You didn't mind me being here then. I could shift back. He looked up at Shota with watery eyes and a shaky smile. Shota ran a hand through his hair. Kid, No, you need to go to this foster home. You can't just be a cat forever. But you liked me better as a cat, Izuku said. Everyone did. And now the kid was crying. This was exactly why he shouldn't parent. I like you as a kid just fine. I'm not cut out to be a parent. That's why I'd be a cat, Izuku said. You took great care of me when I was a cat. Izuku, no. You want to give up your voice already? Izuku shrank in his seat. That was the end of the debate, but Shota didn't feel like he'd won, even if Izuku did go along with him to the foster home willingly. Well, willingly might not be the right word, but he went. Shota had already scoped out the home beforehand on one of his patrols. The Satos had a good record of taking care of kids. Their home was in a nice neighborhood with bikes and other outdoor toys, usually out on the lawn somewhere. He didn't have anything to complain about. Still, he gave Izuku his number before dropping him off. You can call any time, he said. You know I don't keep typical hours. Izuku clutched the slip of paper to his chest with one hand. The other firmly grasped Shota's hand. He hated how the kid's hand trembled. He hated that he knew why, and that he was doing this anyway. But it was for the best. Shota couldn't take care of a kid. He didn't even have a bed for him. He'd spent the last week sleeping on the couch. So he ignored the pang in his chest as he registered Izuku's clear fear at the new home. He forced Miss Sato's easy smile and kind greeting to soothe him, and pushed Izuku inside with the woman. She was asking Izuku what cookies he liked and if he wanted to bake with her while the other kids were still at school, or if he'd rather relax in his new room by himself. Izuku gave Shota one last look. Shota gave in to the pang and hugged him. You'll be okay here. I'll see you around. Izuku started crying. Shota forced himself to let go and turned away, taking one step and then another out of the house. Miss Sato had already swooped in to comfort Izuku. She was quick to close the door behind Shota, agreeing that the only way forward was to cut him out of Izuku's life as soon as possible. He shoved the hurt into a box and pulled up his usual shield of apathy. This was for the best. The foster home wasn't terrible, Izuku decided. Miss Sato made sure he had enough food and was comfortable, gave him extra blankets since he was still cold all the time. She made the honey lemon tea for him, even though his throat didn't need it at that point. But it reminded him of Hisashi and Shota, and he took what comfort he could from it. The kids were pretty nice too. They gave him space the first night, then slowly started bringing him in on their games. He had workbooks to help him catch up in school before he officially started again, and they helped him study. One made him flashcards for his multiplication tables, even. There wasn't anything wrong with it. He was almost disappointed. If it had been terrible, he could have gone running back to Shota. Instead, he was getting ready to go back to school for the first time in over a year. And honestly, he'd been less terrified living on the streets. Kids were ruthless, and he wasn't exactly normal. The cat habits weren't going away. He continually licked his hand before rubbing at itches, and when he was tired, he automatically tried to pick things up with his mouth. One morning, he'd even walked down to breakfast on all fours, earning bizarre looks from the other kids. He didn't want to go back to school. He was weird, and the other kids were going to pick on him. They always had before at his old school, and that was without the weird cat habits. It really would have been better if he'd just stayed a cat. His hand shook over his workbook. He was in the living room, sprawled over the floor with the other kids doing homework. His handwriting was atrocious, barely legible, like he'd only learned how to write a few weeks ago. He hated it. It was one more thing to separate him from all of his new classmates. Tears slipped down his nose, dripping onto his workbook. He had school in the morning, and he'd never wanted to go anywhere less. Maybe he could morph again and run away, disappear on the streets. "Izuku, is something wrong?" one of the other kids asked. "Hey, come on, math isn't that bad," another said, scooting closer to look at his work. "I'll help you." He shook his head. They didn't get it. No one did. No one could possibly understand what it was like living as a cat for as long as he had. They all just wanted him to be normal, but he didn't know how to do that anymore. Shota hadn't. Shota had accepted whatever weirdness Izuku came with. Or had he? He'd still brought Izuku here, after all. Had he made a better cat? Life had been so much simpler then. He kind of wished he'd never morphed back. Whoa! What just happened? That's such a cool quirk! He looks so cute, oh my god! Izuku looked up and around at the other kids, wondering what they were freaking out about. They had gooey faces, cooing at him like everyone who'd met him on the streets had. Oh no. He glanced down and, yep, those were paws covered in green fur again. Crap. He was a goddamn cat again. Hi everyone, it's Tempe again. Thank you so much for getting this far. If you have any suggestions on how to make this better, or a fanfiction you would like me to try and read, please send it to the email in the description or comment down below. Also in the description is a link to the original work and my Patreon if you want to support me. Please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It means so much to me. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks. Bye.